If you've ever bought a budget condenser mic that sounded great on paper, only to discover it was a noisy, hard-to-tune mess in the actual recording room, you already know how painful that regret feels. Those cheap alternatives promise studio-level transparency, but end up delivering a thin sound and a mountain of post-production fixes. The question I kept asking myself before I hit record was simple: does the Neumann TLM 107 actually live up to its pricey reputation, or am I just swapping one disappointment for another? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. What sets the TLM 107 apart is that it's not just another large diaphragm condenser. It's a multi-pattern model that lets you pick from 5 polar patterns: cardioid, omnidirectional, figure 8, and 2 intermediate settings. In a real-world setting, that flexibility matters. Imagine you're tracking a solo vocalist in a small home studio. The cardioid pattern will isolate the voice while rejecting room reflections. Switch to omnidirectional when you're capturing a choir or an acoustic ensemble, and the mic will treat every source equally, preserving the natural blend without needing a second microphone. That kind of adaptability is rarely found outside the $2,000 plus price tier, so the TLM 107 is already giving you a toolbox rather than a single-purpose device. The first practical test I ran was a day-in-the-life recording session. I started by miking a voiceover script in a treated but still modest room. With the Highpass filter set to the 2 kHz position, I could instantly cut out a low-frequency rumble from my air conditioner without having to add a separate EQ step later. The result was a clean, crisp vocal that sat nicely in the mix. When I switched the mic to the figure 8 pattern and repositioned it for a duet, the 2 voices stayed balanced, and the natural room ambience added a pleasant sense of space. No extra reverb plugins needed. Next, I tried it on a drum overhead setup. The 3-position pad, 10 dB, 20 dB, and bypass, proved invaluable when the snares attack threatened to overload the mix preamp. By engaging the 10 dB pad, the input level stayed well within the mix sweet spot, and the transients remained tight without distortion. That's a practical advantage you won't see on many entry-level condensers, which either clip or force you to lower the gain so much that you end up with a noisy signal. Now, let's talk about who should actually consider spending the roughly $2,000 on this piece of kit. If you're a semi-professional podcaster, a home studio singer-songwriter, or a content creator who wants to future-proof your audio chain, the TLM 107 offers more versatility than you'll likely need today. But that versatility becomes a safety net when your projects evolve. The 5-pattern selection means you won't have to buy a second microphone when you start recording instruments beyond the voice. For educators or live stream hosts who occasionally need to capture a full tabletop discussion, the omnidirectional setting lets you pull in every participant's voice without fiddling with placement. On the flip side, if you're a beginner who only records solo vocals or a single instrument and you're already comfortable with a more modest cardioid condenser, the TLM 107 may feel like overkill. The price tag is steep, and the real benefit: those extra patterns won't see much use until your production demands broaden. Likewise, if you're shooting on a tight budget and your workflow already includes external EQ and compression, the built-in high-pass and pad may not justify the added cost. Moving to weaknesses, the first thing I noticed is the mix size and weight. The nickel finish looks beautiful, but the added mass can be a hassle on a standard desktop stand, especially if you're swapping patterns on the fly. In my setup, I needed a heavier, sturdier boom arm to keep the mic stable, which added a small but real additional expense. Second, while the 5 polar patterns are a standout feature, the transitions between them aren't always smooth. The switch is tactile, but you'll hear a slight click that can be audible if you're recording live with the mic in the same room. It's not a deal breaker, but it's something to be aware of if you plan to switch patterns mid-take. Another practical consideration is the need for a quality preamp or audio interface. The TLM 107 has a relatively low output compared to some other large diaphragm condensers, so pairing it with a clean, low-noise preamp is essential to capture its full detail. If you're using a basic USB interface, you might not unlock the mic's true potential, and the investment in the mic could feel wasted. This isn't a flaw in the mic itself, but an ancillary cost that can surprise first-time buyers. Overall, the value of the TLM 107 comes from its flexibility and the subtle quality of the nickel plate diaphragm, which provides a slightly warmer tonality than the more common matte finishes. In practice, that warmth shows up as a gentle roll-off on harsh highs, making it forgiving on vocalists with bright sibilants. The multi-pattern design lets you experiment without pulling out a different mic, saving time and reducing the number of devices you need to maintain. If